The Impossible Project. Dr. Ilara Chen stared at the holographic projection floating before her, a massive asteroid rendered in perfect detail, down to the last crater and mineral vein. She'd spent 15 years of her life on Project Aegis, and now, finally, they were ready for the first full-scale test. "Nervous?" asked Admiral Ramirez, his weathered face appearing next to her in the dimly lit command center buried deep within Cirrus Base. "Wouldn't you be?" Ilara replied, running her hands through her short black hair. "We're attempting something that every species in the Galactic Compact deemed impossible. That's precisely why it'll work," Ramirez said with a grim smile. "No one's looking for the impossible." The command center hummed with activity as dozens of engineers and officers prepared for the test. On the main view screen, a live feed showed asteroid 2387 Delta floating serenely in deep space, 50 million kilometers from the nearest inhabited world. The asteroid, a chunk of rock and metal nearly 20 kilometers in diameter, had been carefully hollowed out over the past decade. Its interior transformed into a labyrinth of machinery, weapons systems, and propulsion technology. "T-minus 10 minutes to primary ignition," announced the mission controller. Ilara's mind drifted back to the first Compact Summit she'd attended 12 years ago. She'd been a junior researcher then, accompanying the human delegation to the massive space station where representatives from the 17 most advanced species in the known galaxy gathered to discuss matters of interstellar importance. She remembered how the auxiliary ambassador, a tall, crystalline being, had dismissed humanity's petition for full membership with a casual wave of its glittering appendage. "Humans have barely mastered interstellar travel," the auxiliary had said. "Your species still thinks in terms of metal ships and reaction drives. Come back in a few centuries when you've developed something worth contributing." The memory still burned. Humanity had been exploring space for nearly 3 centuries by then, had colonized 12 star systems, and had developed technology that rivaled many Compact members. But they were newcomers in a galactic community where some species measured their histories in millions of years. 2 minutes to ignition," came the announcement, snapping Ilara back to the present. "All stations report ready," said Ramirez. "Ilara, this is your project. Would you like to give the command?" She nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The room fell silent as she stepped forward to the central console. "Initiate Aegis protocol," she said clearly. "Begin primary ignition sequence." 50 million kilometers away, deep within the heart of asteroid 2387 Delta, the revolutionary drive system she had designed began to power up. Unlike conventional starship engines that fought against physics, her system worked with the fundamental forces of the universe. It didn't try to move the asteroid through space. Instead, it manipulated the space around the asteroid. "Energy levels rising," reported a technician. "Gravitational field stabilizing." On the view screen, a faint blue glow began to emanate from the deep trenches that had been cut into the asteroid's surface. The light grew stronger, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern as the massive generators inside came fully online. "Field integrity at 87% and climbing," said another engineer. "We're exceeding projected parameters." Ilara held her breath. This was the critical moment. Either her calculations were correct, and they were about to rewrite the rules of space warfare, or they were about to witness a catastrophic failure. "Field integrity at 98%, came the update. "Full stability achieved." The asteroid on the screen began to move. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, it shifted its position, following the predetermined course that had been programmed into its navigation systems. Cheers erupted around her. Ramirez clapped her on the shoulder, his usually stern face breaking into a rare smile. "You did it, Ilara," he said. "The first Aegis-class planetary defense platform is operational." She nodded, relief and pride washing over her in equal measure. "Let's see the Compact dismiss us now." 6 months later, Ilara stood in a different command center, this one aboard the USV Horizon, a diplomatic vessel currently in orbit around Proxima Centauri, humanity's oldest extrasolar colony. The atmosphere was tense as they awaited the arrival of the hegemony delegation. The hegemony, a coalition of 3 compact species, led by the militaristic draconids, had been encroaching on human space for decades. Diplomatic protests had been met with polite dismissals. The compact, dominated by older, more powerful species, had little interest in protecting its newest and least developed member. "They're dropping out of FTL," announced the sensor officer. The view screen showed a swirling distortion in space as 5 hegemony warships emerged, their sleek hulls gleaming in the light of Proxima Centauri. The lead vessel was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons emplacements. "They're hailing us," said the communications officer. Admiral Ramirez nodded. "Put them through." The screen shifted to show a Draconid commander, his scaled face impassive, yellow eyes gleaming with barely concealed contempt. "Greetings, humans," the Draconid said, the translator rendering his sibilant speech into flat English. "I am Supreme Commander Thrax of the Hegemony Defense Force. I come with a message from the High Council." "We're listening," Ramirez replied calmly. "The Centauri system has been determined to lie within hegemony space, according to ancient navigational charts recently discovered in the Zeta Reticuli archives. Your colony is therefore occupying hegemony territory. You will begin evacuation preparations immediately." Ilara exchanged glances with Ramirez. This was the pretext they had been expecting. The ancient charts were almost certainly fabrications, but the hegemony didn't need legal justification. They had military superiority and the tacit approval of enough compact species to act with impunity. Or so they thought. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Commander," Ramirez said. "Proxima Centauri has been a legally recognized human colony for over 2 centuries. We have no intention of abandoning it." Thrax's facial scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Then you leave us no choice but to remove you by force. You have 24 standard hours to reconsider before we begin orbital bombardment." The transmission cut off. "They're deploying into attack formation," reported the tactical officer. "Weapons systems powering up." Ramirez turned to Ilara. "I believe it's time to introduce the hegemony to Project Aegis." Ilara nodded and opened a secure channel to Earth Command. "This is Dr. Chen, requesting activation of Aegis 1. The response came immediately. Authorization confirmed. Aegis 1 deploying to Proxima Centauri. 200 million kilometers from Proxima Centauri, in the empty space between the star's 4th and 5th planets, space itself began to distort. A massive object emerged from what appeared to be a self-contained wormhole, its surface glinting with metallic structures embedded into natural rock. Asteroid 2387 Delta, now designated Aegis 1, had arrived. On the bridge of the horizon, the sensor officer's console lit up with alerts. "Sir, massive object detected entering the system. It's the size of a small moon." "Put it on screen," ordered Ramirez. The view screen shifted to show Aegis 1. What had once been a barren asteroid was now unmistakably a weapon of war. Deep trenches cut across its surface glowed with blue energy. Massive weapon emplacements protruded from carefully reinforced positions, and most impressively, a translucent energy field surrounded the entire structure, shimmering like heat haze in the vacuum of space. "Are the hegemony ships detecting it?" Ilara asked. "They are now," the tactical officer confirmed. "They're reorienting to face the new arrival. Their communication channels just exploded with traffic." "Open a channel to Commander Thrax," Ramirez ordered. When the Draconid's face appeared again, his usual composure had vanished. His yellow eyes were wide, his scales flat against his skull in what human synapsychologists had identified as a sign of extreme stress. "What is that?" Thrax demanded, not bothering with diplomatic niceties. "That," Ramirez said with deliberate calm, "is an Aegis-class planetary defense platform, the first of 12 currently under construction throughout human space." "Impossible," Thrax hissed. "No species has the technology to move celestial bodies with such precision." "Humans do," Ilara said, stepping into view. "We've been working on this technology while the compact dismissed us as primitive. Would you like a demonstration of its capabilities?" Before Thrax could respond, a single energy beam lanced out from Aegis I. It struck one of the smaller hegemony vessels with pinpoint accuracy. Instead of destroying the ship, however, the beam enveloped it in a containment field that neutralized its weapons and propulsion systems. "That was a warning," Ramirez said. "Aegis I could have destroyed your entire fleet with that shot. Instead, we've merely disabled one vessel to demonstrate our seriousness. Now, shall we discuss the status of Proxima Centauri like civilized beings?" The screen went dark as Thrax cut the transmission. "They're powering down weapons," the tactical officer reported. "All 5 ships are assuming a non-aggressive posture." Ilara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I think we got their attention." Ramirez nodded, his expression grim. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. The hegemony won't take this humiliation lightly, and when word reaches the compact..." When word reaches the compact, Ilara finished for him. Humanity will finally have a seat at the table. As she looked at the massive form of Aegis I floating serenely in space, Ilara felt a complex mix of pride and apprehension. They had changed the balance of power in the galaxy overnight. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for that change. Turning the tide. The emergency session of the Compact Council was chaos. Representatives from 17 species shouted over one another in a cacophony of translated voices, gestures, and pheromone releases. At the center of the storm stood Ambassador Marcus Chen, Ilara's father, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the pandemonium around him. Ilara watched from the observer's gallery, her presence technically allowed but deliberately unannounced. She wanted to see the compact's reaction firsthand. "Order," demanded the council elder, a Murisk whose tentacled face rippled with iridescent patterns indicating extreme agitation. "We will have order in these proceedings." Gradually, the chamber quieted. The elder's eye stalks swiveled toward the human ambassador. "Ambassador Chen, your government has some explaining to do. These weapons your species has deployed violate at least 7 compact treaties regarding the militarization of celestial bodies." Marcus Chen nodded respectfully but showed no contrition. "With all due respect, Elder, those treaties specifically govern planets and moons already in stable orbits around stars. The Aegis platforms are asteroids that have been repurposed as defensive installations. No treaty prohibits this." "Semantics," hissed the Draconid representative. "You have created mobile fortress worlds. The balance of power." "The balance of power," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "has never included humanity's interests. For 2 centuries, we have petitioned for full membership in the Compact. For 2 centuries, we have been dismissed as primitives, our territorial claims ignored, our colonies harassed by hegemony forces." He gestured to the holographic display showing Aegis I in orbit around Proxima Centauri. "The Aegis platforms are defensive in nature. They exist to protect human colonies from aggression, nothing more." Defensive. The Xilari ambassador's crystalline form shimmered with incredulity. A single one of these platforms could lay waste to an entire planetary system. "And yet," Marcus countered, "when confronted with 5 hegemony warships threatening orbital bombardment of a civilian colony, Aegis I neutralized a single vessel without casualties. If our intentions were conquest, would we show such restraint?" A murmur ran through the chamber as various representatives conferred with their aides. Ilara could see the calculations happening behind alien eyes. The political landscape had shifted overnight, and everyone was scrambling to adjust. The Murisk elder's skin pulsed with complex patterns before settling into a more neutral configuration. "What exactly does humanity want, Ambassador?" Marcus Chen smiled for the first time. "The same thing we've always wanted. Recognition as equals, respect for our territorial sovereignty, and full membership in the Compact with all rights and responsibilities that entails." 3 weeks later, as Ilara was overseeing final adjustments to Aegis 3 in the Ta-Ceti system, the hegemony made its move. They struck simultaneously at 7 human colonies, bypassing the systems protected by the 3 operational Aegis platforms. The attacks were brutal and efficient, targeting infrastructure and military installations with precision strikes, designed to cripple resistance before ground forces landed. The news reached Ilara via quantum entanglement communicator, the only FTL communication method that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. This is Admiral Ramirez. Emergency Protocol Alpha is now in effect. All Aegis platforms are to deploy immediately to designated conflict zones. Authorization code: Prometheus 7 Delta 9. Ilara's fingers flew across the control panel. Aegis 3 acknowledging. Preparing for emergency jump to Epsilon Eridani. Across human space, 3 massive asteroid fortresses vanished from their positions, ripping through the fabric of space-time using technology that the Compact had deemed theoretically impossible. They reappeared in systems under hegemony attack, their sudden arrival shocking both attackers and defenders. At Epsilon Eridani, Aegis 3 materialized between the human colony and a hegemony battle group of 12 warships. Before the Draconid commanders could react, Ilara had already initiated defensive protocols. Target hegemony command vessels, she ordered the weapons officer. Containment fields only. Let's show them the same restraint as before. Energy beams lanced out from multiple emplacements on the asteroid's surface, each striking the hegemony ship with surgical precision. One by one, the largest vessels found themselves encased in shimmering fields that neutralized their weapons and engines. Hegemony dropships detected entering atmosphere, reported the tactical officer. Colony's ground defenses are engaged but overwhelmed. Ilara made a quick decision. Deploy surface-to-orbit interceptors. Target the dropships but minimize casualties. And prepare to broadcast on all hegemony frequencies. When the communication channel opened, she spoke clearly and calmly. Attention hegemony forces. This is Dr. Ilara Chen commanding Aegis 3. Your capital ships have been neutralized. Your dropships are being intercepted. You are outmatched. Withdraw now, or we will be forced to take more decisive action. The response came in the form of renewed attacks as the remaining hegemony vessels, smaller and more maneuverable than their captured comrades, adjusted their tactics and began evasive maneuvers while maintaining fire on the colony. They're not backing down, said the weapons officer. Ilara nodded grimly. Then it's time for a demonstration. Target the smallest hegemony vessel with a minimum power burst. Just enough to disable, not destroy. A pinpoint beam struck one of the attacking cruisers. But instead of the containment field they had used before, this beam pierced the vessel's shields as if they weren't there, drilling through its hull with terrifying precision. The ship's lights flickered and died as emergency systems failed. Broadcast again, Ilara ordered. Hegemony forces, that was approximately 2% of this platform's offensive capability, targeted with restraint to minimize casualties. The next demonstration will be at 5% and will not be so carefully aimed. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal. 53 seconds later, the remaining hegemony ships began pulling back, retrieving what dropships they could and abandoning the rest. Similar scenes play out in 6 other star systems as Aegis platforms arrived to turn the tide of battle. Within hours, the largest military offensive in recent galactic history had been repelled with minimal human casualties. The aftermath reshaped galactic politics. The hegemony, humiliated and weakened by their failed offensive, faced internal rebellion as subject species saw an opportunity to break free. The Compact Council, forced to acknowledge humanity's new power, expedited their application for full membership. 2 months after the attacks, Ilara found herself back in the observation gallery of the Compact Council chamber as her father signed the formal treaties that would forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. Today marks a new chapter in Compact history, the Murisk Elder announced. With the addition of humanity as our 18th full member, We strengthen our commitment to peaceful cooperation among all sentient species. The words were diplomatic boilerplate, but the reality behind them was anything but standard. Every being in that chamber understood that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Humanity, long dismissed as primitive newcomers, had leapfrogged centuries of expected technological development to create weapons that could neutralize entire fleets. After the ceremony, Ilara met with her father in a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. "You look troubled," Marcus observed, studying his daughter's face. "I designed the Aegis platforms to protect our people," she said quietly. "But I can't help thinking about the implications. We've changed everything, Father. Some species are terrified of us now. Others want our technology. All of them are reevaluating what it means to have humans as neighbors." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Power always changes relationships. The question is how we use that power." "That's what worries me," Ilara admitted. "The Aegis platforms were created for defense, but they could so easily become tools of aggression. Which is why you insisted on the ethical targeting systems and the command structure requiring multiple authorizations for offensive operations," her father reminded her. "You built safeguards into the very fabric of the platforms." She managed a small smile. "I still worry." "Good," Marcus said firmly. "Worry keeps us honest. Worry makes us question our motives and actions. It's when species stop worrying about their power that they become dangerous." Their conversation was interrupted by a chime from Ilara's communicator. Admiral Ramirez's face appeared on the small holographic display. "Dr. Chen, I thought you should know immediately. Aegis 4 just completed its first successful test jump. All systems nominal." Ilara nodded, feeling that familiar mix of pride and apprehension. "Thank you, Admiral. I'll return to oversee the final calibrations tomorrow." As the communication ended, she looked back at her father. 9 more to go. Marcus Chen placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. 9 more guardians for our people. And then we focus on peaceful applications of the technology. Asteroid mining operations that can jump directly to processing facilities. Relief platforms that can arrive at disaster sites within minutes. Exploration vessels that can reach the galactic core within days instead of years." Ilara nodded, her spirits lifting slightly at the possibilities. They had built weapons of unprecedented power because they had to, but the same technology could create wonders as well. "No one believed humans would build warships the size of planets," she said softly, "until we did. Now let's show them what else we can do." As she gazed out at the stars visible through the council chamber's viewport, Ilara Chen thought about the future. Humanity had earned its place among the stars through ingenuity and determination. They had turned the impossible into reality. And now, with the galaxy watching, they would show what humans could truly achieve when given the chance to fulfill their potential. The Aegis platforms floating in space around human colonies were more than just weapons or shields. They were symbols of humanity's greatest strength. The ability to look at what everyone else deemed impossible and ask, "Why not?"